So now having been, in the formal setting and watching students come up through that system from my teacher role, and now seeing from the other perspective in a more informal role, it's just blatantly obvious to me that there are kids who, if all they're getting is the formal system of schooling, then there are going to be innovators whose passions are squashed and stifled, and they don't have an avenue for it.
Hi, this is Rusty Keeler, and you're listening to the Play Nature Podcast, where we talk about play, nature, playing in nature, and the nature of play. I'm glad you're here. Let's have a listen. Hi.
Hey, Rusty.
Hey, Eric.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Yeah, so here we are. We're both in Ithaca.
Yeah.
You're on that side of town. I'm on this side of town.
Yeah, we're doing kind of the same thing in slightly different places.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm super excited to chat today. We've been talking about it for a while, and it's kind of fun because I know we share a lot of like passion, philosophies, and kind of spirit of, childhood and play and learning and growing and, kind of alternative things in that direction. But we haven't really collaborated, but I've always been like, oh, that guy's doing awesome stuff. You inspire me from afar.
Yeah, you too. You too. I've got the same feeling about you. We're doing kind of similar work in very highly overlapping domains.
Yeah, well, so let's see. There's so many things I want to jump into, but how about I'll start with your bio, and then maybe I want to just kind of tell the listeners about free science, just kind of through the new lens that I have with my son going
Cool.
there.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. So our guest here is Erik Herman, and Erik's lifelong passion has been to share the fun, beauty, and utility of physics to all. Using readily available materials, especially junk, he creates interactive exhibits and demonstrations in a physics bus and facilitates hands-on tinkering experiences at the Free Science Workshop. Erik co-founded 3 nonprofits, the Physics Factory, Free Science Inc., and the Global Alliance for Community Science Workshops, all dedicated to promoting joy in science.
Yeah, that's it.
And it looks like you're sitting at the Free Science Workshop right now.
Yeah. This is a playground of sorts. Any time of day, whether kids are in here or not, I can find peace here, peace and tinkering.
Yes, yeah. And I'd say I'm going to paint a picture, and you can paint a picture too. But so my 10-year-old son Levi now is a Free Science Workshop hound. He is there as much as possible. I've always loved Free Science Workshop, and of course Physics Bus. We'll hear about it, but the Free Science Workshop always inspired me, kind of because I feel like it's almost like it's like a cousin to the adventure playground, where children are free to do what they want to do. It's free. It doesn't cost money, and they're free to come and go as they please. And that's some of the tenets of like adventure playgrounds in Europe, where they're in neighborhoods and people stroll up and kids go and they can do whatever they want. And there are also supportive adults that are creative and care about kids, but also care about that freedom and kind of to support their growth. And then Free Science Workshop is this mad, wild place with so many materials and tools, and there's animals and to tend and visit, and and these awesome adult guides, yourself included, that are there to support children in like whatever they want to do, whatever they want to make.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, the free choice piece is such an important part. I had been in education formal education, middle and high school, physical science and physics. And then ultimately up at the college, Cornell University, there in the physics department for a few years. And the when you toggle between a free choice environment where people are there because they want to be there at that very moment, they chose to walk into that space and get involved, versus a more formal environment where there's all these structures around it and we're in certain roles. It's like night and day. And my happy place is in the informal space.
Where anything can happen, or you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So someone like Levi, in many ways, the free science workshop is a place where a tinkerer at heart, someone who really who has ideas and wants to explore and could spend, there have many times been where he didn't want to leave and he had to go for some reason. And that's creating a space for that is what I had set out to do all along. When I discovered community science workshops were an actual thing, I never looked back. We need a place for kids to be able to explore to their heart's delight, without many boundaries, aside from safety and making too big of a mess. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much that's the goal here. I was lucky enough to have that growing up as a kid. My parents bought a house that had a barn out in the back. I don't think they wanted a barn or needed a barn, but that barn was full of junk. The sale of the house included, a discount if we would accept all the junk that was in that barn, and so we did. And so here I was lucky enough to have that. And when I got older and realized that many kids don't have that place, it's not in our school. It's more and more, hopefully, with your work, it's happening in playgrounds. But to have a place actually with tools and with a roof over top was something that really I think needs to be in every neighborhood around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It, because if you don't have that, you're there's a limitation that you don't even know if children, they don't have that stuff. But to have a place where anything's possible, like there's adults that are looking to, all right, you got an idea, let's see how it's going to happen, or the adults are just standing back and just providing the materials. So
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been doing some research. I'm not by any means, a cultural anthropologist, but just recently I've been really intrigued by, that I don't believe this is a new idea. And the little bit of evidence I do have so far from the little bit of research I've been doing, looking back at the, dawn of human history and what do the artifacts look like. It does appear to be true that we were communal tinkerers. We sharpened our arrowheads,
mm,
not all isolated alone and in our different corners of the camp. If you were making pottery, it makes sense to have a kiln, one kiln, not as many kilns as there are adults. So this idea of communal working together with your hands, whether it's for a utilitarian purpose, I'm building something to help me do a thing that I'm trying to do, or a creative purpose, whether it's for something just that's fun to play with or is beautiful, whether you're creating for any of those reasons, to have a place to do it in is definitely, I think, good for the human spirit.
I love that idea of us as social creatures and being together, yeah, in our ideas, and yeah, working on stuff and seeing what other people are working on and taking it higher.
Yeah. And I definitely appreciate too, the solitary piece when you are just off in your corner doing your own thing, but the ability to, to have somebody walk by and be like, oh, that thing you're working on, I did something like that once, and I used, a piece of baling wire to hook those two pieces together. Like that's super useful, just to have that the innovative piece where you've got different perspectives and people able to weigh in um, on what you're working on. It just makes this wonderful soup of ideas come forth.
Love it. Yeah, gosh, it's interesting thinking about like the human brain and kind of creativity and always trying to innovate, and think. Since the dawn of time, as you're saying, and before that, and the idea of our minds being creative, but the idea of like together and social aspect of it,
Yeah.
and as a species, that's how we do grow, innovate, create.
Yeah,
Take,
yeah, and negotiate relationships, that's another piece of it. Also the age, another big difference from more formal settings is that we have kids of all different ages and adults of all different generations mingling together, and just that cross-pollination of all these different life experiences. It's even if the thing you're working on ends up not working, it's just the experience of being in that space and sharing that with others is really magical.
and there's always something going on.
Yeah, yeah. I always, feel compelled to clean up and organize around here. And then inevitably in a couple days it's all, the table surfaces are all covered again. I'm looking at it right now. And I've thought about making it maybe an art installation, having just a GoPro trained on one table over the course of a month,
Yeah.
because it's just really like, I would never imagine when I clean the table surface what it might look like in another few days. The various things that are, it's always something new. It really is. It's almost like a garden where you can't get rid of the weeds, but then the weeds are actually kind of neat on their own. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, it's we've been told that our house looks like the Free Science Workshop, which in one sense is like, I'm like, yeah, that's what we're going for, and then another sense is like, oh my gosh, that means everything looks crazy to this person. It's wild and materials everywhere, and that's Levi. But it's funny. So we have a breakfast nook, like a, I don't know, like a counter the kids sit at and eat their breakfast. But Levi loves having his creations on there, and he's making stuff on there, and so it's always so crazy, just like that. So I've been doing a stop motion like film, and so I'll just be spinning around it. I'll just do click 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 of whatever day it is. It's random. And
yeah.
so I have this thing where it's just like you're just rotating around, and it's all changing all the time, and
Wow.
what's there, and then every once in a while it's clean. It's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, look at that. And then boom, just more creations and madness.
Yeah, it's funny. I when I need to get like work done at a computer, I have to pretty much go to a coffee shop so that I can start at a clean table and end with a clean table. That's where I can actually focus on the clerical side, my admin side of my brain.
Yeah, yeah. Right. It's like the Free Science Workshop is like was it the right, yeah, the right brain explosion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But the opposite is true. When I spend the whole day doing spreadsheets or whatever it is, writing up grant applications and such, I do have to give myself a break. At some point, my brain is like so cluttered with that stuff that I have to pop over to the Free Science Workshop and tinker a bit, or I feel crappy at the end of the day if I haven't given myself that time in the 3D world, that I think
Mm.
our brains all evolved to, to operate in a three-dimensional world in nature, using our hands and feeling textures, hearing sounds, etc. So yeah, I really do believe I'm not speaking in hyperbole when I say that I do believe that this kind of work is important to a healthy mind.
Yeah. Healthy mind, heart, spirit,
Yeah.
all of it. And yeah, if you think about kids that are, sitting in desks all day and, kind of doing what they're assigned to do, and, hopefully finding some windows of inspiration through that. But still, that's a lot of sitting and, taking in, and then to be able to have a place of freedom where it can almost go the other direction. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I like how you said the 3D world, the
Yeah,
real,
and it's funny because I've been using that expression for a while to kind of establish that I'm not talking about the world in the screen, but more and more I find that really techie people, people that are really into like gaming and such, or virtual reality or augmented reality, like they need a further distinction because they're like, oh, I work in 3D too. I'm like,
yeah,
no, that's not the kind of 3D I'm talking about.
yes, yes,
So
not the metaverse.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that's part of what my mission is, of like, yes, outdoors, getting kids in that world of like, yes, let's just be around the elements and the seasons and mud and what's happening and the change and growth in gardens and that kind of stuff, to have that also in them, since the dawn of time. We've humans have had that, and that's part of us.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they need that. So it's that similarity. When I go into the free science workshop, I just like, I just breathe an exhale of like, it just feels so, I don't know, it's tapping some deep thing. I just feel so
Yeah.
relieved.
Yeah, I've thought about the workshop, community science workshops, so we're one of 8 community science workshops that I know of. I am looking for more if anybody knows of a space like this. It's kind of different from a makerspace in some aspects. One of those aspects is the concentration on the K-12 piece, that's the priority in a community science workshop. Another piece is the social justice aspect, that this community science workshops are always situated in neighborhoods in the walking path of kids, especially if it's like we're in Section 8 housing development. Also, the we de-emphasize, we're not against having a 3D printer or a laser cutter. It's you know we're techie kind of people. The people that work here, we're not Luddites by any means, but we really want the kids to be the 3D printers, and the laser
Mm,
cutters, getting their
mm-hmm.
hands in it.
Yeah.
It's just so much of our lives are and will be to greater degrees, um, in a space where we're at a screen. I mean, so much of our lives, that's the ecosystem that we find ourselves existing in, and all the great things that comes with, connecting with people far and abroad, and even something like this right here is made possible because we have these technologies, but there really does need to be this other aspect, of our lives where we really can be working with our hands and digging our fingers into some soil or whatever. We really see community science workshop as nature that's just where we crammed as much of nature into one room as possible, basically. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it continues and it evolves and it grows and changes.
Yep.
Yeah, like its own abstract natural process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. So, how did the idea gel for you? Where, you know, these are
Y-
some deep thoughts and feelings about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I spoke a little bit about that when I was young, I had that barn to tinker in. So that's really where it started. After school, I would go in and just lose myself to whatever project it was. Then during my whole K-12 existence, my friends kind of considered me a science guy. And then yet in the classroom, my science scores weren't that great. So,
Hmm.
so I would say even up through my undergraduate degree, that was the case, that the formal side of science and then this informal side, there was this, this kind of disconnect. How could I be such a, how could I have my identity so defined as, a science person, somebody who thinks in it, thinks about the science of something and builds things that involve science and engineering. But I would say where the real switch happened, where I, decided my life path here with a career that has so much to do with community science workshops, was that when I did make it through college and did get certified to teach physical science and physics at the secondary level, I was 8 years in a classroom, and the stuff that was happening after school, when the bell rang, my doors would still be open to the students. I would be in there finally getting to work on the projects. A lot of
Mm,
times it was demonstrations and exhibits that I wanted to then show my students during class. But the building of those and experimenting with those phenomena was what I was doing. And students
mm,
were finding themselves coming in working on their own projects. They thought my stuff was cool, and then they wanted to build. I had a giant junk pile in a big corner of my room, and sometimes even with some administrators, I was at three different schools during that time, but they actually allowed me a whole extra space that was a workshop space. I was lucky enough to have that. So
mm,
so trying to make a long story short here, when I realized that formal science was probably not the best career path for me, I started going to conferences, Aztec, ASTC conferences, and talking to people in the hallways. Somebody was like, "Have you heard of community science workshops? Because it sure sounds like what you're describing happens after school in your classroom is exactly like a community science workshop." So I contacted some folks out in California that had community science workshops, made those connections, and then never really looked back. I started my own for a few months out there in Tucson before landing a job here at Cornell, moving me across the country. And then it was only a few years into that job at Cornell that I was once again like, we need to make a community science workshop. And I maintained all those connections with the California folks. We eventually did found a nonprofit with the help of a longtime Ithaca resident and change maker and community organizer, Claire Fox, who helped
mhm.
start the Ithaca Generator. Claire and I were the first directors here at the Free Science Workshop. She has now gone on to start two community science workshops in Pittsburgh, where she now lives.
Okay.
And she's heavily involved with the Global Alliance. I mentioned the Global Alliance of Community Science Workshops. She's on the board there. Yeah, that's how it all kind of happened for me, and that's where I got here in this place, the Free Science Workshop. But I will say, it is my big goal to propagate this model around the world as much as I can.
For sure. No, it feels like the kind of thing that, of course, every community, like every kid, it should could have the opportunity, the choice to be able to come to that. Or, I mean, it's like a neighborhood. Like every neighborhood should be there could be a place where kids can are free to wander in and see what's happening
Yeah, yeah, that's how actually that's how the community science workshops got started out in California, in the Mission District in San Francisco. Dan Sudrin, he started the Mission Science Workshop in his garage. Kids were just walking
mm-hmm.
walking in off the street. They saw him tinkering. He spoke Spanish, so he quickly made connections and were able to help the kids with their own projects. But that ultimately turned into him having a big space in at Mission High School, and you know it kind of took off from there. Another one started in Watsonville, and that was way back in the 90s. But yeah, we're still today trying to make sure that people realize that this is a thing, and that everybody everybody can and should have one. I think it's even more and more a need as I said, we're finding ourselves existing more and more in a digital ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yeah. To me, it really reminds me, like I said, of these adventure playgrounds. And I'm thinking of this one that I visited in London that it really reminds me of, because it is plopped, and a lot of them are plopped right in the neighborhoods.
Hmm.
So after school, kids just, show up. I've seen this in Denmark too. They ride their bikes, and they know that this is a place that they can be, and they can do what they want. And different groups of kids come, or they're tending animals, or they're building, their own bunny hutches, or building their own, tinkering around,
Yeah.
and they can come and go. And it's like the story, their sense of community. And I know at your free science workshop for the kids there's a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Like this is a place where I belong. And even if I'm not full power tinkering, or I'm just looking around, that's okay too. Or if I want to like bring in a computer and have someone try to, problem solve it, or tear it apart, or, fix something, they can try, that's possible too. But and how people are, and the adults in it too. You all, the way that you work with children remind me of the play workers at adventure playgrounds, of like that trusting children, supporting children, not intervening or butting in, but still there around the edges in case there's something, dangerous going on, or needs help. And at the same time, you're right there to brainstorm and help out, and prolong the play, the tinkering, the curiosity. And in this day and age, when people are scheduled, or kids are indoors, or they're separated, or they're only connected through technology, that is a form, like kids are. And that's a whole other topic of like, oh well, today children are connecting because they're connecting on Roblox, and they still are playing, and they are talking, and they are laughing, and they are having their own stories. But to have like a physical place where they can be and breathe in the same room, and be there, is vital.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the role we often play around here is the adults in the room are kind of just bigger kids, and we're often working on our own projects, but it makes it much more organic, the interactions that happen when there's no agenda from the adult, if I'm like, I really want to teach this kid how a circuit works or something like that, it does change the vibe. So as much as possible, the way we usually impart any kind of advice like that is similar to how, you know, you might talk with your neighbor if if you've changed a belt on an alternator and they're struggling to change their belt on their alternator, you might pop over and they might be like, "Hey, have you ever done anything like this before?" And then you help out in a very natural, organic way, the way humans, talk to each other when one of them isn't like on a mission to teach everyone how to change a belt on an alternator.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you all are so natural in it. I know a lot of teachers have to maybe bite their lip of like, oh, there's a teaching moment here. But you know I think you do, but you also teach by being enthusiastic about what you're working on, and the place. Like everybody there is like the adults are all seem curious and fun loving, and yeah, want to experiment and explore and build and have that sense of wonder. That alone, like through osmosis, is educational and beautiful. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that sometimes happens, it's rarer and rarer that this happens, but in the bio, we mentioned the physics bus, and that's been a project of mine now since 2006. There's been about 8 different buses, I think. I lose count sometimes. But the physics bus, and then also the free science workshop, every once in a while, we get an adult who isn't familiar, or it's unusual that we're that we have this word, physics or science in naming the space and the experience. And sometimes the expectation is that we're gonna start explaining things, that the adults are there to explain how something works with words. And I have a hard time like on the spot articulating, how we approach it different. I guess the best way that captures it is that I will say, trying not to do it in a snarky way, but letting the science speak for itself is one of the ways that I put it. If we have the time to dive into the conversation, pointing out that we do understand physics, even if we don't have it articulated with words or symbols. There's a think about a bicycle, for instance. There's a lot of physics going on in how a bicycle works. In fact, a professor right here at Cornell since the 70s, I think Andy Ruina has been, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, has been studying how bicycles stay up. And I think finally has reduced it to about 4 pages of quadratic formulas and
Oh man.
calculus, and
Uh,
yet all of that is actually in our mind, maybe not in a way that we can articulate it with words, but there is a way in which our minds understand how a bicycle works, or we would fall right over and crash. So
it's interesting.
yeah, I think being able to articulate things in words has become such a an expectation, whether it's words, symbols, pictures. And I guess with the physics bus and with the free science workshop, the idea is that there are other ways you can understand things that involve the feelings, the textures, and just the intuitions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we are physical beings in a physical world and with physical phenomena. And I think that idea of it, science speaking for itself or the physics speaking for itself, like for children to be observing and watching what's going on and the connections, like we don't know what's all the connections that are happening inside. And I always feel like the adult role, well-meaning, wants to teach or say the one thing that they think it is to try to teach something, but that could be so limited compared to like the infinite connections that are happening
Yeah.
inside the child when they're watching or participating in the phenomena.
Yeah, totally. And it can actually be intrusive. It can actually kind of take away from whatever experience was being felt or
Right,
had
right,
at
right.
that
Like
moment.
like butt out, butt out. We
Yeah.
don't know that we don't need the name of the phenomena or
Yeah.
whatever.
Have you ever sat next to somebody or watching a great movie and then they keep turning to you and telling you what they think is going on, or
Right, right. Shh,
I'm trying to
quiet.
enjoy the movie.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So kids are like they're trying to enjoy the movie. Trying to
Yeah,
enjoy.
yeah. So many
Yeah.
times, especially so we do with the physics bus, most of our traffic through the bus is K through 12, and it centers around fifth grade. I would say that's our most popular. Third to fifth grade is probably we get probably 7,500 to 10,000 kids in a year. But then we do less often public events, whether it's grassroots or whether it's Streets Alive or something like that. And when that happens, the parents are standing by, and it's such a contrast sometimes from what the kids had been experiencing when they were on their own and free to explore and not with mom or dad watching over their shoulder. We have seen, instances where a kid is watching a magnet fall through an aluminum pipe, and it looks like it's going through molasses, and that there's no molasses in there. You can see the magnet clearly, but it's like falling in slow motion. Um and this one time, this kid is holding it up above their head like almost like a telescope, and then they're holding it down and they're watching it fall, and a good 2 or 3 minutes, and then dad pops over and says, That's Lenz's law that's making that do that. Lenz's law, there are these eddy currents that are forming inside the aluminum, and they, resist the motion and make an opposing force. And just the the sparkle in the kid's eye suddenly
Oh,
just turned to a cloud.
oh.
So anyway,
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, it's funny because it's like the adults, the well-meaning, right? Or we feel like that's our role, and this goes for like with play, children's play and that kind of thing of like the adults kind of stepping back, but they feel like they need to do those explanations. But really, it's like, yeah, butt out. I'm having like a million billion things going on in my my brain and body, and I'm understanding about the world or myself, or yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I think you might have shared with me a video. I believe that it was a documentary based in the UK somewhere, where it did go into like the play workers and how, that younger 20 something or even late teens tend to be a really good fit for the supervisors in an anarchy playground or whatever, because they do just naturally kind of stand back or participate in ways that are more like a friend helping than an adult, who's there to either teach you something or, make sure that, you follow some kind of rule.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I appreciated that. I really thought, that is, it's just one more reason why having the multi-generational aspect to any community, it just seems like it's more organic the way knowledge flows among people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. The younger kids seeing what the older kids are doing. So it's not segregated by age. Everybody's mixed in together. Then older kids can then be mentors and help the younger kids along and all that goes with that community. It's a community.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah, yeah. To have that freedom of play, of choice, I feel like that's where children can find who they are, like what their ideas are. They're making connections without the voice, necessarily the voice of the adult over there saying, "Oh, this is science, this is math," but that they find, "Oh, I like this, or I like making these connections, or I'm a builder, or what do I wonder about? What am I gravitating to?" And it's that freedom that maybe children don't have throughout the day or overscheduled and or just on the screen where it's someone else's creativity that's beaming at you. But to have that time, space, and materials where they're like, oh, they're finding out who they are, and then to have that where the adult can be supporting that, and that
yeah,
feels like a direction for their life. Like, oh, I'm finding myself, and I'm going to keep finding myself. I'm going to keep following this thread that had enough room to to spark, to grow, to be,
yeah.
and we all need that.
Yeah, I think it's a real key to the cultivation of innovators to have spaces like, in your world and in my world, these spaces where you really can pursue an idea as far and long as you want to. For myself, for me, the physics bus that I got interested in building exhibits and then eventually, wanted to show them off to people, it taught me so much of what I know today. It makes me, able to function in a professional world. That I know how to write a paper is because of the physics bus and trying to make appeals for more physics buses, and that I can do Photoshop or video or whatever. These things all, or even spreadsheets, frankly.
Yup. Yup.
These were all necessities, and I was motivated to learn these things exactly because I had this single focus, for better or worse. My parents for many years, they're just coming around to understanding what I see in this wacky, physics bus. But for many years, it was like this was a distraction from, you know, a more, a more career, I guess, or professional lifestyle. But I look back and I think, the reason why I think I have any marketable skills is because I had this passion that I kept just driving towards. So now having been, in the formal setting and watching students come up through that system, from my teacher role, and now seeing from the other perspective in a more informal role, it's just blatantly obvious to me that there are kids who, if all they're getting is the formal system of schooling, then there are going to be innovators whose passions are squashed and stifled, and they don't have an avenue for it. So I believe that it's a necessity that we have these places where they can make their ideas come to fruition and keep those things alive. That's where our innovators, that's where they get nurtured.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people talk about, like, what if Michelangelo never had a chisel or never got introduced to marble? He
Yeah,
would have never done that. And it's kind of like, well, what if these kids never got a hot glue gun in their hand and
yeah,
and
yeah.
all the materials and so what that leads to, because they have that opportunity. So what advice would you have for well-meaning adults, either teachers, educators, parents, preschool, all the different ages? How could they uh, adapt this or be inspired by it? In maybe they're not starting their own free science community workshops, but how could they blend that into either this philosophy or the materials into what they're already doing if they like this and believe in it?
Yeah, I would say if you can afford the space to dedicate a part of your house to messes, and allow that, you can put some guardrails on it and say, once a week we're going to clean this place up, or whatever it is. But if you have a little bit of space, then you can dedicate to a mess. Or I would say, if you have a space in your house that you keep tidy for this, you know, idea that you're going to have guests over, and then you notice that, you don't generally have guests over. So
Hmm.
why are you keeping that part of the
Hmm.
house so tidy for guests? Or invite guests over to do something like, make candles or whatever the heck that's messy anyway. So yeah, if you have the space, that's probably a good move. Investing in a hot glue gun is $2, I think, at the dollar store, and
Hmm.
it can open up pathways. Hot glue gun plus the recycle bin, and now you
Yeah.
have
Jeez.
a third
Yeah.
grader who's going to be occupied and can make wonderful things. So yeah, if you're in a position to organize with your community, with your neighborhood, to, again, if you don't have the space to afford a messy table for weeks on end, then try to organize with some neighbors. Say, look, well, you've got that old shack out in the backyard that's, you know, full of junk that you never touch. Can we clear that out? That's actually how it happened here in Ithaca with the free science workshop. If I rewind way back to maybe 2012 or 2013, we started doing it in a friend's garage. Chris Bell, the second, well, he's a fifth grade teacher, at Fall Creek, said, how about you just use my garage? I have it full of
uh,
all kinds of, shoe boxes and stuff. Because he's always got his eye for projects to do with the students in his classroom. So he ends up with a garage full of, shoe boxes. And I was like,
yes.
well, if I help you make an attic in here, we put all the shoe boxes and we could clear out a space.
Ah.
Anyway, that's how it all got started. But back to the point, yeah, if you can organize with some neighbors to create a space where the kids can go and tinker together, that's even better. And then it's only one small step from that. If you make it a permanent space and really dedicate it to making a community science workshop. In which case, get in touch with me
Yes.
because we have a whole nonprofit whose mission it is to help propagate those. So we will support you if you want to start one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. So awesome. So awesome. Yeah, my dream is that every community would have a place like this. And also the idea of the indoor and outdoor, if there are the idea that there would be animals with you're tinkering or you're building, doing the pallets or you're building the forts, adventure playground style outside, and then to come into a space like this too, but that every place could have something like this. So what's are you just going to keep doing it? Would you have any other future dreams, expansions, or just help plant more seeds everywhere?
Yeah, I would say my own aspiration, getting, I don't know, in 10 years or now, I'm probably gonna officially retire, though I never will fully, I can never fully envision myself not doing this kind of work.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think more and more I'm going to be focusing on the propagation. I'm going to be focusing on making sure that others in other communities have the supports that they need. But yeah, we'll keep the physics bus going. I'll keep building what I call exhiblets. A certain, exhibit in the science center world might mean a whole room, can be an exhibit. And we on the physics bus have these, usually it's like 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, made from common materials, microwave or a hair blow dryer. um, and we just gave them a name, exhiblets, to set them apart.
I
And
love that.
yeah, so I'll keep
Oh,
building exhiblets.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I should before we end, I should just kind of back up and be like the physics bus. First of all, we didn't just do a full description, but I remember. So they're converted school buses,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, the first one was like I remember seeing come through town, and I don't know if it was like wrapped in all in tinfoil, and it had like it looked like it was rocket
Yeah.
ships off it, rocket things, and so it was this wild vehicle that was just kind of going down the road and going from school to school and event to event, and there was the exhiblets inside, and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's a real fun thing. I it spread a little bit. Now Claire has a bus in Pittsburgh. I think she calls it the Science Party Bus,
Mm-hmm.
and she's got half of it is animals and lizards and snakes and things like that. But yeah, half of it is exhibits. And then out in California now, there is a physics bus and another one on the way. So yeah, these are just mobile science centers. You can think of it like that, but I think really shrunken down and made scrappy, like more like a food truck. If you think of a science center, or even here, our Ithaca Science Center is more like a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we're the food truck, more scrappy, scrappy
Yes.
kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So in the playwork world and adventure playgrounds, they have play workers, but then they have play rangers, and they might be more the mobile. So instead of it having going to the restaurant and play the adventure playground, they go to neighborhood where it might
Oh,
be like
nice.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. They're going to roll up with the Playmobile, or in Germany the Spielmobile,
Uh-huh.
and there they are, and they have loose parts, and it comes out, spills out into the park or wherever. But it would be cool. Are there any like remote tinkering buses, like where it's even maybe less exhibits and more, and just like a roving tinkering bus?
Yeah, there's one out in Salinas, California, that's called the WOW bus. WOW stands for Workshop on Wheels.
Nice.
And it's great. It's an old city bus, and so since it was inherited by the Salinas folks from the city, because the bus was deemed, not worthy of carrying people around anymore, that bus is pretty much restricted to a small, radius, because you don't want to get, halfway through Oklahoma and break down and, in a workshop on wheels. So I
Yes.
would say I do want to make more instances of that. That's something we're even thinking about, the physics bus parking
Mm-hmm.
at a park and getting out some tables. So long as we can stay out of the rougher weather. It is a great idea. These pop-up workshops. It's something that we do want to develop more. I would say the ones that do exist are more like Fab Lab type of vehicles that have 3D printers and
Oh,
laser cutters and stuff like that. So those do exist. I don't think there is so much of the workshop on wheels, the more scrappy kind of, we're chopping wood, we're getting out the hot glue guns. But we do want to develop that aspect of it because I do think it's a great way to seed new science workshops.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Eric, thank you so much. I love it. I love the concept, the philosophy behind it. I love how you found, your life path through it, and the different stages along the way, and then what a service that you are creating for the children of Ithaca and beyond. And I'm so happy that my own family gets to partake in this, and we're benefactors and love that. Well, we benefit from the beauty of your vision, and the tinkering and the saying yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rusty, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate the work you're doing, getting the word out there about this kind of work. I really appreciate that you had time for me to get on the show and tell you about my stuff too.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep rocking it.
All right, cool.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. Do you have a comment or a question? Email me at playnaturepodcast@gmail.com. I like talking about this stuff. And maybe we could use your question on a future podcast episode. As always, I have some free goodies for you in the show notes, including my outdoor loose parts guide. Fun stuff in there. And so I wish you the best in your outdoor play adventures. And when it comes to adding nature to your yard, or loose parts, or saying yes to risky play, my favorite motto is dream big, start small, and never stop. Oh yeah. Woo, 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 woo. Let's do it. All right. Have fun out there.